This is where we will pick up Jan Baalsrud's escape story in April 1943. He was rolled over by 4 men one night in a rowing boat from Flatten over there, across the Lingen fjord, and bearing in mind snow was on the ground, he was taken to this location here, which he called Hotel Savoy, because compared with what he'd been living in, it was luxury. This hut, not much bigger than your average garden shed, is not the original. The original, alas, burnt down, but in all other respects it's identical. When they arrived here, he was partially snowblind, he couldn't walk, he couldn't stand on his own feet, and he had to be carried into this hut. You've got to duck your head because it's a very small entrance, and this is a representation of what it was. The bunk, it is said, was too small for him and his feet had to dangle out the end. He was in here, the wind blowing through the gaps. He would pick out moss, which you can see around the edges, to stop the gaps for his cigarettes. It was also in here that the intense pain took over, and he decided to cut off quite a few of his toes, which we are told they were so black that he could not feel anything. The toes were cut off, put on a shelf above him, and when 5 days later, bearing in mind he was in here for 12 days, 5 days later the resistance guys could get back. When they opened the door, the stench was overpowering and they had to go outside again and take breaths before they could come in. Really, from this part forward, dear old Jan wasn't going anywhere under his own steam. It is said there was a lovely view out over the fjord, and of course there would have been, but these trees have grown up. From here, he was then taken by sled, which they brought over. And we can't see it today because the cloud is so low down, but he was taken up here and up over the mountains to eventually, we go from here up over the Gentleman's Stone, which is far too rugged for us to get to, taken across the mountain, up the tundra up the top, but the storms hit him so bad they turned back here and went to Jan Baalsrud's cave, which we shall visit in a moment. I say in a moment, allowing for the camera. And from there to Sami brothers Aslak and Per Thomas Ball took him over the way then over the border into Sweden and eventual freedom. Now I'm going to walk from the hut back up to what is now a main road. The E6 runs down the whole of the coast of Norway. And okay, it's, you know, it's not level, but it's not desperately steep here. Bearing in mind this was snow covered, April, middle of winter. Jan could not move. He was tied to this homemade stretcher made by the caretaker from the school at Flatten, and it was assembled down by the hut because they daren't put a sleigh in a rowing boat because the Germans would be suspicious. As I say, there was no road here in 43. And then we believe it was up, up and up. And we also believe that he was taken further down this road, a few hundred meters, and then gone up through a smally frozen waterfall area. These things appear overnight because we had a lot of rain yesterday at the head of the Mandalin Valley, and it doesn't take long for these things to start flowing and flowing fast. Anyway, we're going back for a cup of coffee. Here we are. I don't sit at the top of the Mandalin Valley in northern Norway. We're as far up as a road and a dirt track can take us. But this is part of the escape route for Jan Baalsrud in 1943, an SOE trained Norwegian commando. He was further up in the Alps, their Alps up there, in a cave for approximately 3 weeks, and the local people fed and took care of him. He was in a desperate way. We will carry on up tomorrow and walk the 6 clicks up to the cave. It's not really a cave, it's just a crack in the rock, but we're going to go up there tomorrow and check it out. Well, good morning all. 10 o'clock. We've had a hearty breakfast of porridge and toast, and we're off up to the head of the Mandalin Valley and Jan Baalsrud's cave. Jackie's going well. We have our sarnies packed, and let's hope the weather holds. There's a little bit of pasture land on the valley bottom. Somebody's coter there, uses doubtless a little cabin. Well, there is a sign on it. I'm going to have a look, see what it says. Jack, I'm just going to check out this sign up here, see what it says. Well, Baalsruds had 3.7 clicks further up the valley. Well, that's reassuring. Pardon?
I reckon that's the track there.
Yeah, that's probably the track to the bridge there, which looks as though it's been washed away. There should be a second bridge further on up. Whether or not that's still over the river.
No, it goes up that way.
Yeah. Trees uprooted over there. What do you think then? Go down here or push on up on this feature? There's two people up there. There's one person there in a white top. They're picking berries. I reckon we go down this track.
What's it like at the end of that?
Well, there's a bench down here, so that's a good sign. You might fall to your death here, darling, but yeah, piece of cake.
Okay, get down.
Yeah, come on down.
It's okay, you can come across, it's all safe.
Any trolls got? No trolls guarding the bridge?
No.
There's the old bridge there. And they've strapped this one on, so it doesn't get washed away this winter.
Do you want me to?
What? "50 meters. Well, 50 meters away. You tell me. Wind's picking up nicely now, it's getting quite fresh. Let's see if you can get plenty of mic without killing yourself. Jackie's busy tucking into her banjo at the top. She sent me on ahead to scout. Once she's sort of dropping into the ravine. Oh, Christ. Let's wait for these people to wander by. Steady the buffs. Well, this is it. And I think, from what I've read, it's in here. Now, I'm not sure if I would want to spend 3 weeks in here in the middle of an Arctic winter on a stretcher, unable to move. I can't get out of my sleeping bag, I can't get off the stretcher. I've cut away most of my toes. I've lost far too much of my own body weight. And I'm totally reliant on total strangers to keep me fed. Baalsrud hut. Tenth of May 1943 till he got into Sweden on the 27th of 5th 1943. In actual fact, the guys up from Mandolin would come up here most days late in the afternoon skiing up because it was the middle of winter, and then from here they dragged him up those hills again on a sled up onto the high tundra, and eventually he was taken to Sweden by a couple of Sami reindeer herders in their herd across the border, and he made it to freedom. He eventually got back to the United Kingdom, where the SOE took care of him, and he did come back to Norway before the war's end to fight again, but he'd lost virtually most of his toes on both feet, and he was in a desperate condition. You must have finished your sarnie, have you? Well, there's your accommodation for your night, for the night down in there. Take your Bergen off and have a scranny down there.
Wow.
Of course, the far end, I believe they blocked off with snow blocks to stop the acting as a wind tunnel. But nevertheless, you would have had snow dripping in down here when the sun hit this part of the valley. I've got my doubts about the number of trees here, whether or not 75 years ago there were this many trees. I don't know. Jackie for scale is going to climb down, get into a bivvy bag. No, he was tied on a stretcher with a couple of wool blankets wrapped around him, which were made in the village. And of course he couldn't get off the stretcher, he was literally tied into the stretcher, he couldn't even stand. And from what I've read, this little shelf there was a little sort of shelf there which he was laid upon. Whether or not it was that, because this may have been filled with snow down here, and there was a rock. If you sit there, in the book they talk about, the resistance guys talk about where they sat on the rock and spoke to him. So whether or not he was stretched back between that rock in front of your knees and the one behind you as a shelf. Well, this is all open here. Whether or not some of it may have fallen in over the years, I don't know. 3 weeks here, middle of winter. Totally reliant on others. Well, we've made it here. I reckon we ought to think about getting a mouthful of coffee, finishing our sarnies, and then making our way back before the weather changes. Someone else coming now. There goes the Nuke of the North. Easy, she says. Easy. My turn now. There's the head of the valley, a box canyon as the American cousins would say. Or a draw. Yella.
Oh, he's right in the squelchy bit.
Oh, that's lucky. What makes you think the winter storms washed this bridge away? There's an aluminium girder there, another one down there, one here. When the snows melts up here, it must be a raging torrent. Young Norwegian couple up ahead of us there with their dog Wolf. And he looked like a wolf as well, but he was quite playful. He only bit me twice. Fuck off. Now, I'm not certain where Baalsrud is the name of this waterfall. It's just one of about a dozen this size we've passed today. But if you stop and think about it, that thing is running 24/7, or as long as there's water feeding it. We've been here a good day and a bit, and it's constantly running. Constantly. Where does the water come from? How much is up there? Hey? I don't know. Don't bother waiting for me, Jack. I'll catch you up. Brr. Brr. This is for all my Welsh friends. Brr. Andy. Well, there's the truck. We're nearly back. Well, what a difference a little bit of rain makes to that waterfall. Well, here we are, Sunday morning as well, at the grave of Jan Baalsrud. Died 71 years of age. After the war, he devoted himself to a lot of charitable good works, helping ex-servicemen, disabled servicemen, the scouts, the guides, etc. Moved to Tenerife in the early 60s and lived out there with his second wife. In the latter years, he returned to Norway because he was obviously missing Norway, and when he died, it was his greatest wish that his ashes should be buried here in Mandalen churchyard, amongst the people who helped him, the greatest, on his 2-month flee from the Germans. And he asked to be buried in Aslaksson's Fosvold's grave with him, because he was a guy who did so much to help him and see him on his way to freedom.